All right, pulling up all my stuff. All right, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, depending on where you exist or live in the world. My name is Eric Wolmerink, and I am part of the product team over here at Decisions. I do a lot of things concerning our roadmap and kind of understanding what the future of Decisions holds, what features we're going to be adding, what's coming down the pipeline. So I work really closely with the product team and with the engineers, kind of gathering requirements, working with our customers, understanding what you guys want added to the product. And that's kind of where I'm currently working. My background, though, I've worked quite a bit with training. I did that for about the past 5 years, helping train our customers on how to use the product and the best kind of practices around that. And before that, I've been with Decisions several years before that, doing a little bit of everything, doing some support work, some professional services. I actually originally wrote code way back in the day, back, way back when. So I said, I'd been here for quite a bit. And yeah, have a little bit of experience going through all those sorts of things. So welcome, everyone. As we go through this, welcome to the Lunch and Learn. If this is your first time or you haven't been here before, what this is a Monday through Thursday daily call we hold with experts here at Decisions from various departments and experience levels and roles, where it's really just an open Q&A time for you to come in, ask us questions. I can demonstrate stuff on the screen. We can talk about the product roadmap. We can do a lot of things with this time, but really it's just free time where you can sit with some of us. We can answer or get to the answers to your questions and just kind of have the space here to do that. So again, every day, Monday through Thursday, 12 to 1, you can check it out at decisions.com/events if you would like to register for any of those or join us during your lunch breaks and come hang out with us. So without further ado, if you have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat panel or in the Q&A panel. I have both of those up and monitored by the team, ready to go. And so we are here and available to go through those things. So start typing those up or thinking through. You also can raise your hand in the attendees panel and we can unmute you if it's a little bit more discussion-based question or a little bit more complex. I'm happy to go through that as well. So to start, we actually did have a question pre-submitted from someone who registered. So I'm going to start there. But if you have other questions as I'm going through, please feel free to add them or interrupt and we can go from there. This question is all about data repeaters, which is good. I really enjoy data repeaters. But the question here is there a way to calculate a total sorry, I lost the question. There it is. Is there a way to calculate a total on a data repeater as soon as the user fills out their fields? For example, you have a quantity and a cost, and as soon as the user enters numbers on the two fields, the total should get the value in which the quantity times the cost is the total field. I've done this in the flow before. I'm not sure there is any way to do this on the data repeater form while the user is filling out. Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Decisions. Over here, I have a local install of Decisions. This is on my laptop. This is on, I believe, version 8. I might be version 8.1. Let me double check. 8.1. Okay, this is the current released version of Decisions that I have here locally. And I'm going to dive through this data repeater question. So there's really two ways that we can do this. Really, there's two. I think there's two parts to this that we can set up. So one is on the data repeater line itself, can we calculate the total on the line? And the answer is yes, absolutely we can. No problem there. And the second is then can we get a total of the totals? Can we sum up the list of all the totals to get them? And yes, absolutely, we can do that as well. So I'm going to demonstrate both just because I think there's some cool concepts here and some things that'll help you out. So I'm going to start in my Lunch and Learn panel. I'm actually just going to create a new folder for me to build in. We're going to call this total data repeater example, just in case I need to export this or give this to you after the call. But yeah, let's go ahead and start this here. I'm going to create a simple data type to hold these three fields that we care about, which is quantity, price, or was it quantity, total, I guess cost, quantity, cost, and total. So I'm just going to create a really simple, let's just do a flow structure because it's easy. It doesn't get stored in the database. It's really light. And we will call this maybe inventory. We'll call it that. My inventory data type, that's the name of my structure, is going to have a couple of things. We're going to have a, if I can spell, a quantity. We'll keep that as just a straight integer number. We're going to have a cost. Now that can be a decimal because cost can have some decimal places there. And then we'll have a total dollar amount, which will also be a decimal. So I'm just creating this holder. This, if you're not terribly familiar with repeaters, this is how they work. The repeaters are going to repeat a set of data, the set of data being some defined structure or set, of structure that you may have. So I'm just creating a structure so that I can repeat these three fields over and over again on a form. That's the whole point of data repeaters. So I'm going to go ahead and click save here. I now have this flow structure called inventory. And now I'm going to go ahead and create my data repeater. So I'm going to click create form at the top. I'm going to click create new because I don't have this existing repeater yet in decisions. And on the left-hand side here, we have this data repeater option, and I'm going to create a data repeater control. And we will call this the inventory repeater control. Again, descriptive names so that I could understand what is going to be placed here. And I get this default layout of 3 kind of items in a row. That's perfect. But always with the data repeater, the first thing you need to tell the repeater by clicking the properties on the right is what data are we repeating? What is the type of information that I would like to repeat over and over again on my form? So I'll click pick here, and I'm just going to go grab inventory. I could either search for it or I could go find it in my folder tree. It's also here under my current folder. Inventory is the thing I'm going to repeat over and over again. Now I can go ahead and have a number box at the beginning. And this is going to be my count of items, my quantity. We're going to grab another number box next to it. This is going to be my price or my cost. And then I'll just have a label because I don't want to actually have the user change the total. I want the total to be automatically calculated. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, get your text from data name. So I've set up what things I want on my form, then I know how it's going to look. Now I can go ahead and configure each of these. For example, the first one, I told you this was quantity, right? Where is that coming from? And maybe I probably want to add labels if I were making this a really good looking example, but I can come over here and say, you are going to get your data from what's coming into the form, my inventory data structure I picked, and you will get this from, I said this was quantity. So I'll pick quantity here. And then maybe I want to make some more behavioral changes, like it's a quantity, so I don't want decimal places here. So I could say instead of outputting as a decimal, output it as an integer. I see my format change, we're good to go. So that's going to be my quantity field. And then I have over here, again, I need to choose the type of data this is tied to. We're going to pick cost. I actually do want it as a decimal. Again, I probably would add labels to make this more descriptive, but for the sake of this example, we'll get the idea. Now I have quantity and cost. And now the tricky part, I need to set total, which again, I have that field on my data structure, which is good, but I'm not calculating the total yet. And the warning that you're seeing here is pretty much just saying, hey, I have a label and it's mapped to a decimal, so I'm not quite sure what to do here. It's going to be a warning. Really what will happen is it will try to convert it. And so we should be fine leaving this validation message alone. But we still haven't done the calculation. So there's 2 ways to run the calculations when you're using data repeaters. The one would be on the parent form that's calling the repeater. You could run an active form flow to fetch the data and calculate it, but I wouldn't be able to push that into a specific line of my data repeater. So the second is you actually can run active form flows on the repeater itself, which is what we're going to do for the first part setup here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new active form flow. We're going to call this calculate total of inventory item. Again, some nice descriptive name. And I'm going to go write a flow that goes and calculates those 2 things, which in our case is just multiplying the 2 numbers together. So I'm just going to search for my multiply step. There we go. We're going to go ahead and multiply. What are we multiplying? I can come look at my input mapper here. And I'm going to multiply looking at my form data. This is the data that I know about my form. Oh, bummer. I guess it works because I should have named my number boxes something a little bit more meaningful, but that's okay. But we're going to multiply the value in number box 1 multiplied by form data. Did I pick number box? I picked, number box 1 dot value. Again, proper, if I had time, I would actually go rename these values to be meaningful. I would call this quantity instead of number box 1, or I call it cost instead of number box 1, but that's okay. We're just going to multiply them together. And now I have the output here of multiply one underscore output. So I need to do something with this. There's a couple ways we could actually go set the input data back to on the total field of our input data. That would be one option. Another way that I like to do is under our form rules components, because this is an active form flow, I can set the control value, which is actually what I'm going to do here. And then I could go pick my control. So the control I want to set is under form data. We're going to set our label. And then what value are we going to set our label? We're going to set it to multiply one underscore output, the output of this step. And I'm going to actually select it as unformatted so that it keeps it as a string for me. So there's no validation. So perfect. So now, if I didn't mess up, what this should do is on the repeater execution, it can run this flow that multiplies those two numbers together and goes and sets that control's value. Now, when do I want that to run? Well, I want that to run whenever either of my number two or my number box's value changes. So you type into quantity, it should change. You type into cost, it should change. It's going to run this flow, multiply them together, set back on the total field. We should be good to go. So that's part one. And if I did everything correctly, let's go test this really quick. This should work. So we're going to save my repeater. I need to put this on a parent form. So I'm going to very quickly, for the sake of time, create a inventory management form. On our inventory management form, we're going to have a button that says complete. We're going to have our data repeater here at the bottom half. Let's go ahead. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Let's have some data repeater buttons at the top here to add and remove members of here, add data, remove data, perfect. And then we need to pick what repeater line we're showing in our form. So we'll pick the one I just created called inventory. So this is going to repeat a list of all the inventory items. What we're going to call this is all inventory. I don't care if they select individual rows, so we're going to leave that there. My add button is my data repeater add button. Root button is here. Very simple repeater. And again, if you're not terribly familiar with repeaters, I might have gone a little fast. Totally fine. We have some documentation on things about it. But the idea behind repeaters is I can take a undefined list of things. I could have 5 or 100 and repeat them, consistently and meaningfully on a form. Cool. I have a form. Final thing to test this. Let's put it into a process. We'll call this the inventory management process. Good to go. And currently we're not doing anything. Obviously I could go like fetch the inventory from a database, or we could go call a service to do that. But all I'm going to do for the sake of this example is pick my inventory management form. And for now we'll end. Normally, again, I would go like update the database or do something here. We need to give this a list of inventory. Let's just go ahead and ignore that for now. I don't need to give it anything to start. And I'm not going to pre-select a line number, so I don't need to give it anything there. Go ahead and save our process. Let's run a quick test to make sure I haven't lost my skills. Form loads, very ugly. I apologize. But we're going to go ahead and add a line here. I'll see that it has a 0 quantity, 0 price, and a 0 total here. So let's say we need 2 $500 items. And I do see that my label on the right jumps up to 1,000, which is perfect. If I add another line, again, this one should calculate on its own. I have 5 items here at $24, 120. And I could go on and so keep going, so on and so forth, to make this however I want. And we can see very quickly that it's calculating all these totals. So that's part, I think that may be part of the question is, can you on individual items of a repeater actually run calculations and do meaningful things? Yes, you can run active form flows on individual lines of the repeater. Something else that I think would be nice though, is what if I wanted this total calculated on the parent form? Could you do that as well? And of course, the answer is as well, yes. So I'm going to show that very quickly. It's pretty much the exact same thing as I did on the repeater itself. I just need a flow that runs at some trigger point and calculates that total and pushes it somewhere on my form. So I'm going to go ahead and add a text box at the bottom. Oh, not a text box. Sorry. I don't want that editable. We're going to add a label at the bottom. I'm going to call this name my total label. It's going to get its text from a data name, and we will call this the total, the total of all the totals. Perfect. So now that's going to be here as a display piece on my parent form. And again, I'll do this really quickly for the sake of time. If anyone else has questions, I'm going to go ahead and click add here. We're going to call this the calculate total. It's a terrible name, but that's fine. It's going to be triggered whenever anything of value inside my data repeater changes. We're going to go ahead and trigger this parent flow to run. And this is going to be a really, really simple flow, just like the other one. Instead of multiply, though, I need to add a bunch of stuff together. So we have a sum step that will sum up a list of values, in our case, a list of totals. So I'm going to grab sum. I'm going to grab the sum SUM step. What are we summing up? What list of numbers are we summing up? And we're going to come into here. We're going to go grab it from our form, and we're going to grab it from, oh, not the form. Yeah, form data. We'll grab it from our data repeater. What are we going to grab it from? Our item source. That's the list of everything inside of there, and our all total count. I need to grab it from the count of all the totals inside of there. So digging in a little bit, but I'm grabbing it from my form, the data repeater on my form, the items that are in that data repeater, the totals. We're going to sum up those and call it sum1 underscore output. So final thing, just like I did inside of the repeater, I'm going to go set the control value of one of my controls on the form. But this time, the value I want to set is under form data. This time it's my total label. And the value we're going to set there is the output of my sum1 as an unformatted string. There we go. So ideally that should work. I'm actually realizing now that my conversion between strings and numbers might cause an issue here. So I might have to think through this a little bit more, but that's okay. Let's go test this really quick. Yep, I'm breaking my form because now there's a new input, my flow rather. So my flow is saying, well, wait a minute, do you want to put anything in total? I say, no, we're good to go. We'll go ahead and save our flow one more time. Let's go test this. I have about a 50% chance of this working. But let's say here, 24, 144, perfect, it does work. Hey, I'm smarter than I thought. So now I have this total here, which is calculated on the actual repeater itself. And if I go ahead and add another line down below, it should add up those two numbers together. And sure enough, it is. So as I go in here and create more items inside my repeater, I'll see my total down here getting updated. So again, this is a really ugly example. I would obviously spend time making this much prettier and putting the effort in to actually make this with labels and proper formatted things. But that's the idea, is that yes, you can dynamically change items on the repeater lines themselves, and you can dynamically take the data from the repeater and do stuff with it outside of the repeater. So I can accomplish both of those goals here. Wonderful. And yeah, I saw, sorry, I'm not sure if your audio is working or not, but I saw the original asker of the question. And if I mispronounced your name, Manal, if that's mispronounced, I apologize. But yeah, that should hopefully answer your question. And then all that data, sorry, just last little thing, all that data should get sent out from here from our form. So I get the inventory, I get the one that I selected, the current item, the all items, and then if I wanted to send that data out, you would go to the repeater and say send data as output data, and it would be good to go. So fun fact. Now the only note here of caution I would say is because we're repeating data and then we're running flows on a repeated set of data, you just want to be mindful of what those flows are doing, like how much they impact the system and how often they're running. You want to make sure those triggers you set up are really well thought through, because for every line of a repeater, I'm running a flow. And if that flow is a really big flow that takes 5 seconds to run, and I'm running that 100 times, that's 500 seconds of flow execution I just put on a form. So you may see some slowness there. It's not typically a concern, especially with things like simple math that I'm doing, and I'm only doing it when the value changes. My triggers are small, the flows run in milliseconds. There's no concern with my current design. But I've seen larger data repeaters that do some really complex math or integrations and those sorts of things that take more time and system weight. You just got to be careful about that. Just something to be mindful of as you're building those things out. And then question to follow up, can you get a link to this video? Absolutely. And if you're interested, I'm happy to even export this tiny project for you to have as a working example. Again, no critique on design as far as UI design, but functionality, it works just fine. But absolutely, we'll follow up after the call and send you the link. Cool. All right, that was, I think that was the only pre-submitted question. So if anyone else has questions, please feel free to raise your hand in the attendee panel or post in the chat and come off mute. We can, I'm happy to answer anything you have. And if not, if there are no questions, I can spend the next 10 minutes or so going over, 10, 20 minutes going over the product roadmap if anyone's interested. Let me pause for a moment. I'll go on mute and see if anyone has any more questions before I do that. All right, cool. No problem. Well, sweet. Well, since I have some extra time here, if anyone cares or wants to hang out for a minute, let me go ahead and talk a little bit about our product roadmap. At least the kind of condensed version of the product roadmap of the next kind of rest of the year, I would like to call it, and things that we're going to be doing here. These are things that we are working on. These are things that we are kind of actively doing in the product. There's one more thing. Oh, sorry. Before I keep going, there's one more quick question. Thank you, Andrew, for catching me. All right, before we come into the roadmap, let me come into here. One more question, is it possible to take off the defaulted zeros from the number box and the currency box? Yes, it absolutely is. So in the number box and the currency box, let's go open my form. Can we take, oh, I got to go into the data repeater. Can we take off these defaulted zeros? Yeah, the number box can be formatted a number of different ways. Pun not intended, but that's good. But if you want to format the decimals and how many defaulted zeros there are, you can click the number box, come over to the properties. Now, what I did is I said output as a certain type of data. So like on my quantity, I output it as an integer, so there were no decimal places. But you could even get more specific if you'd like, and you can change the formatting here to custom. So I can say output as decimal custom, and I could say show 20 decimal places. And it will go ahead and do that, or show 2 decimal places, or allow a number group separator, or don't show the number group separator if it's over 1,000. So yes, you can format the visual representation of the data on the form without actually changing the data. The data itself doesn't change. That's still stored properly in the database. Is there a way to have no zeros? Oh, okay, so like the default 0 here. That's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to this one. Allow null, maybe that's how you do it. There might be a way, I believe we've had this request before. If I say, if anyone else on the team knows off the top of your head, let me know. I don't know. I would have expected that to have done it, if anything. Okay, cool. That does. I just had to refresh the screen. So yes, if I think it's this allow null value, we can actually test this really quickly on this parent form here. If I had a number box and just say allow null values, and then give this a test name, and then it looks like the preview has to save and reopen it. That's okay. Nope, that didn't do it. So initial value blank. Nope, can't do that there. Do not format whole number. All right, one of those settings I did, maybe his custom was 0. All right, I have to figure out the combination of things I did. It might have been auto populate. Ah, thank you, sir. Yeah, that probably was it. Good call. So let's go set this back to portal settings so it looks normal. Uncheck auto populate and maybe uncheck allow nulls. We'll try that. I don't like that I have to save and reopen that. That's just a really minor inconvenient thing. That's what it was. Thank you, sir. Yes, uncheck that auto populate checkbox. It loads blank, and then it still will only let you enter in numbers. So if I try to type something else in, it will default to 0. But to load, at least it will be empty. Thank you, Andrew. I guess I should be more systematic in my testing and not just click all the buttons and hope it works, but that's all right. Wonderful. All right, cool. Please feel free to keep typing questions or thinking through anything. Since I already kind of showed this slide here of our product roadmap, I'm just going to go ahead and show it up on the screen for just a minute. If you have any questions on what we're doing over the next year or through the rest of this year, it's not really the next year, although we do have plans into 2023 already. But as an idea of what you can expect in the latest versions of 8 and kind of some really cool things we're doing with the product. So just to highlight a few of these that I think are big changes to the tool that are really, really helpful and important. Really the two things, or the one thing we're focusing on this year, two things, I'm going to say it carefully. The two things we're focusing on this year is the deployment experience of how you move things from one server to another, including the server architecture and how those are deployed in containers and those sorts of things. That's a focus number one. And focus number two, towards the end of the year, is going to be a lot about the developer and designer experience in the portal. We just have a number of things that are a little bit disconnected, some ways to do things that are kind of outdated and old. So you're going to see a lot of refreshes and updates to the UI, a lot of changes to how we kind of present information to users, just some modernization of like form controls and that sort of thing. All that's kind of scheduled throughout the year. But the two major efforts you'll see in Q3 as the expected delivery of these is number one, a deployment server rewrite, currently called the repository. The repository currently is more of a developer-centric experience. When you go to move an item or something from one server to another, you got to have a lot of knowledge and understanding of the architecture of the project and who's built what, and the check-in and check-out of that project is really complex. And so we want to simplify that. We want to remove the burden of kind of moving items from one server to another out of the hands of the developer and into more of a traditional CI/CD pipeline, more of a deployment process. So we're configuring, we're actually rewriting the entire repository to now be a deployment process, a deployment server, where you still have that central change repository, that change management server that other servers connect to, but now deployments are handled in an automated way from the deployment server. So you'll see a lot of improvements to how we conceptualize and build projects, how the dependencies of those projects are tied together, how you deploy from the deployment server to the repository or to like a QA server production. All of that's getting a massive facelift and rewrite scheduled for Q3. So keep an eye on your inboxes because we're going to be sending some materials out as we kind of finalize designs and get these things added to the product. But the way you deploy items across your servers is the first big thing we are changing. Now, tied to that really closely is this idea of projects. You see it here on Q3 under RD 145, Project View Overhaul. The way developers build in decisions currently is with a massive folder tree on the left-hand side of your screen. And the developers are responsible for building in folders, maintaining folders, moving things between folders. And it can, when decisions starts to grow and be more embedded in larger projects or with more and more things built onto it, it can get a little complex and a little bit more hazy as to where things live and who owns them and that sort of work. So we're going to revamp that entire folder tree and instead put everything into a project. So now when you're building something, it must be tied to a project. It must be put into a box in a container called a project. And that allows us to do a couple of things. Number one, the developer experience is going to become more streamlined and with much better visibility in UI into what's occurring for build flows and build projects, because now we can put bands around that project and you can actually get views into it and reporting and insight and understanding of what's happening in the project, who's working on what. You can write communications between items inside of that project and say, we're adding a feature called to-dos where you can add a to-do on a step or a flow or a project and say, hey, hey, Joe, I haven't finished this integration. Can you please finish this when you get in tomorrow? So putting those bands in the developer experience means that developers really focus on the thing they should be doing. Building flows, building rules, editing rules. They shouldn't care about a big folder tree and how to manage that. It also improves our deployment process. The reason these are tied hand in hand is now you should be able to take that project as its own self-contained thing and pull it out of one server and push it to another. And that deployment process should be wicked simple. And that's the goal here of what we're trying to do. So those are two massive changes that we are doing to the entire overhaul of the kind of the portal. When you log in, you'll no longer see a big folder tree. You still see a folder tree, but you'll now see individual projects you can connect to, and you go ahead and into the project. It's secured with permissions, and then when you go there, you're going to have a default dashboard that's meaningful, that shows you information about the project, and you can just start building right away. Much better experience. With that, we're doing some refreshes. We're going to refresh the flow designer, the report designer. Those are both getting refreshes. The way you build pages is getting a data refresh, so you don't have a bunch of independent running flows on a page. Kind of like with active form flows on a form, you can now have an active form flow on a page. That's coming in quarter 3. So quarter 3 is going to be a big shift in how developers experience the decisions tool. Meanwhile, in quarter 2, we're just doing some things to improve really the kind of functionality of the product, the way we archive things, the way that we kind of allow rules to be linked together, the way that you write queries for database integrations, the way you experience in mobile apps. So quarter 2 is focused on kind of getting the engine tidied up and good to go. Quarter 3 is going to be a big refresh of the design experience and deployments. So again, that's just kind of a very high level overview. Each of these R&D tasks, these are research and development tasks that our team goes through. They write a design document for, we submit feedback from our customers, we make sure we're building the right features. It goes through an approval process internally with some engineering leads and some key partners across the organization. And then it eventually gets added into the product roadmap, or to the development product, and they go develop through it and build it and add it and test it and release it. So this is what you're seeing here is the conceptualized early ideas that then get implemented as features in the product. So since there are no questions, and this is what I've been working on for several months, I just wanted to show this off really quick. There's some really, really cool things coming. This is the rest of this year, just for a very quick teaser, what 2023 is going to focus on. And for lack of a better word, 2023 is really going to focus on accessibility. Accessibility is going to be the key word for 2023, in the sense that we want to make it easier to use decisions. So easier to access decisions. It should be self-evident in the way, self-documenting. So in a sense that we want to reduce the burden of support and documentation and tribal knowledge that you have to know in order to build in decisions. For example, the data repeater question that came in, you could have searched our documentation. There's some examples about, how to run active form flows on data repeaters. I believe that's in our documentation site, but there's also tons of documents. So how would you know to find it? We want to make the tool kind of self-explanatory. Think the iPhone. The iPhone doesn't have a long knowledge base with a million tutorials on it on how to use your phone, because a lot of it is designed with that accessibility kind of mindset. We're going to take that and apply that to the designers and things that we add to decisions as we move forward. That's kind of the theme of 2023, revamping some things that have been haven't been looked at in a while, and that's what we'll be going through. But here's the rest of 2022, at least what we're working on, just so you have an idea. As a little shameless plug as well, if you are interested in getting the full roadmap presentation, which includes a little bit about our strategy or positioning in the markets, we dive into those tasks a little bit deeper to understand. We look at some numbers and data around kind of how we're doing as a product organization or as a product team, and how we're developing in the product. You're welcome to join any of those calls. They're every other Thursday. We do a product roadmap presentation. It's either myself or our CTO, Heath Oderman. We don't have one tomorrow. We have one next week on Thursday. What is that? The 26th. So if you want to join, just shoot me an email, eric@decisions.com, or shoot your CSM an email, and they'll get you added to those calls. All right, I'm gonna dilly-dally for just another minute or two. And yes, dilly-dally is the official term we use here at Decisions. But yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions come in, so great, no problem for me. Thank you everyone for your time. If you need anything else, please feel free to join another Lunch and Learn on another day, or send us an email if we can help you out. support@decisions.com, eric@decisions.com. I'm happy to help you. Otherwise, thank you for all attending, and we will talk to you very soon. Have a wonderful day.